Okay, everyone, I think we will go ahead and get started. We are a small group today, but that's all right. Good morning and welcome to the advisory committee meeting for the OLCC's artificially derived cannabinoids, otherwise known as CBN, the permanent rules package. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this morning. My name is Nicole Blase and I am the rules coordinator for the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. A few housekeeping notes before we get started this morning. Today's meeting is being recorded. Please ensure that your phone or computer are muted unless you are speaking today. Only invited committee members will be a part of today's discussion. Members were selected due to their level of interest or position within the community. With that in mind, we ask that each of you serve as goodwill ambassadors to the discussion so that you may represent your constituency professionally. Please be courteous to other committee members so that we don't have multiple participants speaking at once, if we can help it. If you're joining via Teams, you can use the raise hand function, or if you are calling in, please interject when appropriate and we will call on you in order. Committee members, please state your first and last name and affiliation when you are making a comment for the record. Today is Tuesday, April 4th. Excuse me, that is not true. Today is March 19th at approximately 10:06 a.m. As many of you are familiar with the rulemaking process, but for those of you who have not yet had the opportunity, or for those that are listening in, I will begin by saying a few words about the rulemaking process and the purpose of advisory committee meetings. The purpose of an advisory committee is to increase the public's involvement in the drafting and development of administrative rules. The Oregon Legislature, through its enactment of the Administrative Procedures Act, ORS Chapter 183, stresses the critical importance of the public's participation in policy development. Advisory committees are an excellent way to solicit input from internal and external stakeholders who are likely to be impacted by the development or amendment of agency policy and rule. Consequently, advisory committee invitees may include licensees, permittees, industry representatives, OLCC staff, members of law enforcement, local government, the public, local community organizations, small businesses, and other interested parties. The purpose of having all of the members on this committee today is to hear from different parts of the industry and public health and safety partners. The Commission strives to hear from all interested parties. Our role today will be to explain the background and context of these rule changes and, the changes that are being proposed in this package. We will provide facilitation to ensure that all committee members can provide input today. Under Oregon's public meeting law, this meeting is open to the public, and members of the public are free to observe our discussion, but may not offer comment. Non-committee members will be able to tender comments during the public hearing and comment period. The agency will digitally record this advisory committee meeting and will produce and circulate a record of our discussion. During this morning's meeting, we will seek your input on the proposed amendments to the artificially derived cannabinoids CBN permanent rules package. In November of 2024, the Commission adopted temporary rules to extend the deadline for CBN to meet the same requirements as other artificially derived cannabinoids under OAR 845-025-1310, 845-026-0400, and 845-026-0410. This RAC will discuss adopting that extension through permanent rulemaking. We'll move on to introductions. I will be calling on our RAC members to introduce yourselves. Again, please state your name and organization that you are representing. Again, I'm Nicole Blase, and I'm the rules coordinator for the OLCC, and I'm joined by Stephen Crowley, who is our subject matter expert for CBN. Stephen?
Hi, I'm Stephen Crowley. I'm the Hemp and Cannabinoid Compliance Coordinator at OLCC.
Thanks, Stephen. And are there any other OLCC staff that would like to introduce yourselves to our RAC today? Go ahead, Arno.
Good morning, everyone. Arnaud Simon, and I am the Public Health Policy Analyst here at OLCC.
Thanks for joining, Arnaud. Anthony, Shannon, go ahead.
Anthony Galtoski, Policy Analyst for the OLCC.
Shannon Hoffeditz, Director of Marijuana Compliance, Interim Director of Licensing.
Thanks, Shannon. Amanda?
Hi, Amanda Borup, Director of Education, Health, and Policy at OLCC.
Thanks, Amanda. And I will move on to our rep members today. And my apologies if I mispronounce your name. I will do my best. Danette Wernette.
Hi, yes, I'm Danette Wernette. I'm the Program Manager of the ODA Hemp Program.
Thanks, Danette. Terry Quinones. Margaret Flershinger. Courtney Moran. Oh, Margaret, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
I just realized that as I was speaking. Sorry about that. Hi, Margaret Flershinger with the Oregon Health Authority Medical Marijuana Program Policy Analyst. Thanks.
Thanks, Margaret. Courtney, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Courtney Moran, Chief Legislative Strategist for Agricultural Hemp Solution.
Thanks, Courtney. Gabe Parton-Lee.
Hi, everyone. Gabe Parton-Lee, General Counsel for Wild and Wild CBD. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Gabe. Gretchen Bodrell. L.A. Lindquist.
Hey, Alea Lindquist here, CEO of FloraWorks, CBN supplier.
Thank you. Mike Kirkwood. Chuck Wright. And Mia Marquez. I thought I saw Mia here. Mia, you are on mute. I'm not sure if you were wanting to introduce yourself. All right. We will go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone. I will turn the rack over to Stephen Crowley to get us started today.
So before we jump into the rules, a little more background and context on how we got here. So in 2021, the legislature gave OLCC authority around regulating artificially derived cannabinoids within the OLCC market. We established rules setting general requirements for artificially derived cannabinoids. We allow non-intoxicating artificially derived cannabinoids that occur also naturally in the plant, that are not intended for inhalation, and are made in compliance with general food safety standards. And then the key element of those requirements is that the ingredients have to meet the same sort of requirements that any novel food ingredient or dietary ingredient would need to meet. So either making a GRAS determination, whether that's self-determined or submitted to the FDA, or submitting a new dietary ingredient notification to the FDA and receiving a no objections response. At that time, we initially gave a time-limited exemption for CBN, artificially derived CBN, to continue to be sold without yet meeting those requirements. Initially, that was until July of 2023 that exemption lasted. In 2023, industry reached out and indicated that they were making significant progress towards meeting those requirements, but we're not going to be able to meet them within that time frame. Industry requested a 12-month extension of that deadline. We ultimately extended it an additional 18 months to January of 2025. As of last year, with the passage of House Bill 4121, these requirements now apply to hemp products in the general market in Oregon, not just products within the OLCC licensed market, which is where the 2 out of the 3 rules in this package come in. And then near the end of last year, we received feedback that, again, the industry was close to meeting these requirements, but would not be able to meet those by January of 2025. So in November of last year, the Commission adopted temporary rules to extend that deadline 6 more months to July of 2025. And temporary rules expire if they aren't adopted through permanent rulemaking. So that is what we are doing here today. This RAC is part of the permanent rulemaking to consider, that extension to July 1st of 2025. So I think with that, we can hop into the rule language. There's not a whole lot of changes. It's the same changes that were contemplated through the temporary rulemaking. I put a link in the chat if anybody doesn't have the language in front of them, but it's basically just changing January 2nd to July 1st in all 3 of the rules, and then there's just a minor language clarification, basically making clear that this applies to products with artificially derived CBN, but those products can also contain other cannabinoids. That was a little unclear from the language before, so just a small bit of cleanup there. With that, I think we can open it up to discussion of the proposed changes of that, keeping that July 1st deadline that was contemplated in the temporary rulemaking in November.
Sorry, are you looking for input from community? Yeah, sorry. I mean, if we're just talking about changing those dates, this is just solidifying the rules that were discussed and have been allowing companies. Is there anything other than that up for discussion within this meeting? It doesn't seem like there's other components here, but.
Right, yeah, that's all these proposed rules is basically making permanent, what was contemplated in the temporary rulemaking last year. So basically doing permanent rulemaking to make sure the CBN exemption applies up until July 1st of 2025. And then after that date, any artificially derived CBN in products for sale to Oregon consumers will need to meet the same requirements as any other artificially derived cannabinoid.
Okay, yeah, no comment. We should obviously ratify that rule since companies are currently selling it and have continued on based on that information, so.
Yeah, Gabe.
If you guys could just, if any of the RAC members are providing input today, if you could please just state your name and affiliation so that we have that for the record. Thank you. Go ahead, Gabe.
Gabe Partonley from Wild. And this and just to make sure that I'm clarifying exactly the application, this is both for the regulated OLCC market as well as for the open market, the grocers and anybody that's for sale in Oregon, or any Oregon consumer, or any online sales, anything like that.
Yes, that's correct. So the change in 845.025.1310 is for the OLCC license market. The changes in 845.026 400 and 410 apply to the general market.
Okay, and I think my concern that I have for the folks on the market is the products that are on shelf that aren't moving as quickly as anybody hopes them to be, and whether this app, as I read it, this application would apply to any transfers whatsoever. So if it's on shelf on July 1, it has to be pulled from the shelf and destroyed, whether at retail or in the manufacturer's facility or in the grocery store.
Right. Yeah. Has to be pulled from the shelves. This doesn't require that it be destroyed if the CBN that was used to make it, if the manufacturer is still close to meeting their general requirements but hasn't met those yet. If they meet those requirements, then the product containing the affected CBN could potentially return to the shelves. But yes, as of July 1st, no further sales or transfers of those products.
Right, and no, I appreciate that clarification because we're we always hope for a 2-day turnaround for products that we produce and get onto retailer shelves. But I know that some retailers have stock that lasts a little bit longer. And so I guess what kind of guidance on this would the OLCC be issuing to make sure that retailers are adequately informed and consumers are adequately informed to ensure that nobody's accidentally committing a $10,000 civil penalty? Oh, you went on mute. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. So we have talked about at least doing a bulletin out to the industry, reminding folks of this. It was also covered in the bulletin this past December after the temporary rule was adopted.
Right, and again, I was participating in that rec at that time, so I really appreciate the extension that the OLCC has added here. And I think I can't remember if I said it at that time, but just because this industry likes to move either glacially slow or incredibly fast, there's always an opportunity to make it easier for the retailers, whether they're grocers, whether they're cannabis retailers, whether they're smaller shops, mom and pop shops, just to make sure that there's I would encourage the commission to find a sell-through date for products that are already on shelf at this time, at the very least, as and cut the spigot off in a tiered way to have manufacturers be at a different timeline than retailers.
I've made a note of the comment. I think the idea when the temporary rules were adopted was that July 1st is the sell-through date.
Thank you.
Yeah, Courtney.
Thanks for all those clarifications, Stephen. That's definitely helpful. I wanted to ask, we keep doing these piecemeal extensions. Why don't we do something more reasonable for folks to actually sell their products out and go to January 1st of 26, which is when the product registry goes into effect and the new labeling requirements go into effect. So have kind of a more comprehensive approach to what's happening in the marketplace at one time instead of part here, part there. It makes it a lot harder for the manufacturers and even the retailers to comply.
Yeah, I mean, I've made a note of that comment. When the previous extension through January 2025 was adopted, that was intended to be the final extension. So I think there's that balancing act of, at what point do the extensions have to stop so that we don't keep coming back here and doing the same thing over and over.
Right, which I think is very understandable, but when we're not seeing movement from the feds to actually get approvals made, how can the manufacturers meet the requirements that you've actually put in place?
I'm not aware of any federal barriers at this point. Has anybody submitted a GRAS notification or dietary ingredient notification?
This is the lay linguist from Flowworks. Yeah, we currently do not know what the landscape at the FDA is going to look like. Self-affirmation of GRAS is obviously achievable. We are currently in the process of doing that for our synthesized CBN. We don't necessarily know if that will qualify in the eyes of the FDA in a broader context of whether they will acknowledge a cannabinoid as a food ingredient down the road. But obviously self-affirmed GRAS is a legal process. Our intent is to file a dietary ingredient, but we have to wait for peer review on all of our toxicology work still before we can approach the FDA with that documentation. So yes, it is an unknown landscape right now of how they will respond to cannabinoids. One other thing to add, the FDA is also now under RFK looking to abolish self-affirmed grass. Whether or not we get ours done in time or whether that ends up happening to be determined. And the legal fight that they would have to do for that, I know it's already been challenged by the FDA and failed at one point. So I'm not sure they have the ability to do that, but certainly it sounds like there is intent to.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, and that's something that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on also.
Gabe, go ahead.
Thanks, Gabe from Wild. The federal piece aside, has the OLCC done a review of product that was produced with artificially derived cannabinoids to determine how much is still in inventory, has been intaken, or is on retailer shelves? I mean, I don't know exactly what the back end of metric looks like, but I would imagine that through the packaging and labeling approval process and things like that, there's a way to track those products that are approved through metric, and then determining where and what sort of quantities are in stock. I think that would be helpful in informing some of the like the economic impact pieces and potential economic impact of sell-through.
Yeah, that would be helpful information to consider here, and hopefully RAC participants will include that in the fiscal impact of for this rulemaking. Unfortunately, there's not really any clear way to do that through metric. Some manufacturers are using naturally derived CBN, others are using artificially derived CBN. Those aren't distinguished in metric, and even to the extent that we can identify that on label approvals, the name on a label doesn't necessarily correlate with the item name that they use when tracking in metrics. So we don't have access to that information, but we did invite Wild and several other companies that manufacture products with artificially derived cannabinoids to hopefully provide that context.
I appreciate that. And, just from our perspective, I know we've been moving ahead of it with the expectation of this deadline, but, I'm not here representing Wild as the only operator in the industry. I know that there's a lot of other people that use this cannabinoid, and so I want to make sure that there's not pulling up the ladder behind ourselves.
Thank you, everyone. Are there any further comments about the proposed language for the CBN package? Going once, going twice. Okay, and then with the meeting materials that were distributed to the RAC members, I also sent out the fiscal impact questionnaire. Is there anyone who would like to discuss the potential fiscal impacts to this rule package on record today? Gabe, go ahead.
Gabe would. So let's see, Stephen and Anthony, you both raised the point that you aren't able to see from the back end the transition in packaging. That totally makes sense. And I think, is there a way to provide information on the overall scope of folks that have applied for products that contain CBN, and then a side by side with folks that have applied for non-artificially derived CBN as a method of sort of estimating that overall fiscal impact or like total impacted licensees. I know that we can't like see total inventory. That totally makes sense, but with the data that you've got, I'm curious if there's a way to provide that sort of information to help and analyze the fiscal impact or project it.
This is Anthony Galtoski for the record. No, Gabe, I think it would be quite laborious to go through CAMP and find all that information.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. Any other fiscal impact information that anyone would like to provide today? All right, and then any public health and safety impacts from any of our public health and safety partners that you'd like to add for the record today? All right, if there is nothing else, last chance, Gabe, go ahead.
Last chance. I do have a question on the public health and safety, just because, I mean, it's important to us in the industry as well, because maybe there is, but I don't know if there is a published list of product complaints on the basis of what's included in them. I know that, there's public, safety notices for recalls and specific products where there's those things that come up. But I'm curious from the public safety side, if you've received any information or if there's a sort of balance on where complaints are that are received by the OLCC on the basis of product type. And I know Olay has done a ton of individualized products studies for his, CBN, and I don't want to steal his thunder here, but like I'm curious from the consumer side of, any complaints or like a record of complaints that you've seen based off of CBN, whether or not artificially derived.
Steve Crowley for the record. No, I'm not aware of any record like that. In general, OLCC, does not tend to receive adverse reaction complaints. It's not really within our typical scope, and unlike some other kind of related industries, there isn't that requirement of adverse event reporting to be communicated to us. So it's sort of an open question, I think.
Ali, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Just making the comment. We've run a decent range here of safety studies as well as motor function battery studies on CBN. It is non-intoxicating, and our synthesized CBN is safer than natural CBD. We've pulled the pitchforks on something that is also happens to be the largest selling SKU category in the entire cannabis industry, treating the largest reason consumers consume cannabis in the first place. So just a couple comments there of where we've kind of gotten ourselves to here.
All right. Is there any further feedback from any of the RAC members that have joined us today? All right. I'm going to put this information in the chat before we conclude, but should any RAC members have additional feedback after today's meeting, questions or comments, or a fiscal impact questionnaire or public health and safety, if you could please email those to us no later than Friday, March 21st, that's this Friday. And of course, any other time you have feedback or questions, please contact us. I will put this in the chat. All right, so I guess we will go ahead and conclude since we have no further feedback. On behalf of the OLCC, we want to thank all of our RAC members for your contributions today. A notice of public hearing will be issued in the next few weeks, which will allow for interested parties to provide testimony or submit written comments. And if you would like to contact us further, again, our rulemaking email is in the chat. So thank you again to everyone today, and we look forward to working with you in the future on this rule package. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.